Hello and welcome to Power Encounter. My name is Cyndi Biondi, and our program is dedicated to highlighting the love and power of Jesus Christ in our lives and how he can deliver us and save us and make a difference in our lives today. And I'm here with Mike Frazier, real excited about having him here with us. I've heard so much of his story, and we really wanted to get that story out to let people know what he's gone through, what God's delivered him from. And so welcome, Mike.
Thank you. Thank you for having me, Cyndi. I appreciate it.
Yeah, our pleasure. You've had a lot of adventures, being someone who's a special operations aviation regiment, a Nighthawk, and I know that there's a lot that's gone on with you in all of that. And so I think we'll kind of start from the beginning, if that sounds good with you.
Yeah, absolutely.
You know, kind of how you started out. Most of us are a compilation of our experiences. And so, you know, what happened in your childhood that would cause you to want to go into special forces, and can you tell us a little bit about your childhood and what happened there?
Yeah, absolutely. You know, life comes at us in different array and different aspects. Different people have their own lives and tribulations. I think mine started pretty early. Basically, I came up. I kind of got created and was developed in chaos. When I being a young child, infant, you know, my father was abusive and alcoholic, and you know, I seen a lot of bad stuff with my mom and myself, and that kind of I guess that kind of set the tone for me being in an atmosphere to where I kind of had to be in a protective type of position to where I felt like I needed to do something, but I was helpless at the time, obviously, because you know, I was a little bitty guy, running around in diapers. And you know, just growing up, you know, being inundated into stuff like that on a daily life, you kind of isolate yourself, and that's really where my journey began, with self-isolation and wanting to be a protector, having like a protector type of role.
Did you feel like you needed to protect your mother?
I did. I felt like I wanted to, but I obviously, as a child, knew that there was nothing I can do, and it created a lot of fear in me, which didn't prevent me from actually doing anything, because I didn't really know any better at the time. But I think over time, growing up, it always stirred something in my heart and in my spirit and in my soul to want to do something in the event of something that were to happen, to prevent things like that, and to kind of move forward to a greater role in life, to where I have a greater calling, to where I don't have to be helpless, you know, stepped on, abused. I wasn't, at a young age, I realized I wasn't going to accept that. And I kind of took on the world just by myself at a young age.
Even as a really young age.
Yes, absolutely.
And then did you have some experiences with Jesus as a young person at all?
You know, I didn't. Just recently, I've realized that I have, but being young, I didn't really understand what was going on. I remember certain instances when I was a baby, when I don't really think I should have had memories of certain things, but I recall specific events, and I've talked to my mom about it, and she goes, I've never told you about that.
Wow.
There's no way you could have known that. And they're devastating images of seeing, you know, your mother getting beat, or even yourself going through these things. And it was put into I was given those images, and I was remembering those things for a specific purpose. And it wasn't until just recently that I realized why those things happen.
It's amazing, and I know that a lot of our audience had traumatic childhoods and can really relate with that, with you having that helpless feeling and seeing so much conflict as a child. And so as you grew, now did you, in high school, how did that affect you with your relationships in high school?
You know, I kind of bounced back and forth from my parents getting divorced when I was really young. I think I was about 5. Then I bounced with my dad for a while. I was in an abusive relationship with his wife at the time. It was my stepmom. So I kind of got run through the ringers a lot, getting beaten,
Wow.
isolated, kind of stuffed in boxes.
Oh my goodness.
Those things that no kid should have to go through. They should be worrying about, I think about my son now.
Yeah.
They should be worried about what toys they're going to be playing with, or what they're going to do when they come home from school. That should be their concern, not about survival.
Right.
But it was definitely a tough thing to kind of go through, and going through those times and changing times, I kind of bounced back, and I kind of wound up moving back with my mom, and from that time, I kind of had a more stable atmosphere living with my mom and my stepdad.
In your high school years?
In my middle school, high school years, it allowed me to kind of be, I guess it kind of helped rehabilitate me in a way. I still wasn't in a spiritual or religious atmosphere at all, really.
So you didn't have any help in that?
I didn't have any help in that aspect, no. But I still believe I was led on a right path for a certain reason, because I was, not to toot my own horn, but I was a pretty good kid. I didn't really get into a whole lot of trouble. I kept my nose clean.
In spite of everything.
Yeah, believe it or not, you do see a lot of stuff, and you see kids nowadays, they're taking things out because of the way they were raised, and I guess for sure I could have, turned out to be just like, what I was going through, lashing out.
But instead, so you ended up in the armed forces. How did that happen?
Well, I grew up in a very small town in Coolidge, Arizona, and I decided that that's not really where I wanted to be. I knew that's not where I needed to be. There's something out there greater, and I knew that. And so after I graduated from a very small school, I was in a Christian school, actually. I think there was only, yes, I think there was only actually 6 of us that graduated.
So if that's a Christian school, then did they say scriptures? Did they talk about Jesus?
They did. We had every morning, we said a prayer at the flagpole. We said the Pledge of Allegiance. We went in and we listened to my teacher, Mr. Tony Carter, and principal, and he would give scriptures and revelations. But at the time, I guess because of my household and everything else away from that, I didn't really have that solid foundation to kind of keep me into it. I was more inundated with my dirt bike and, being a teenage kid, so I really wanted to get away from school, and I wanted to go do my thing. And so I really wasn't ready.
When you look back on it now, do you think about the planting of
Oh, absolutely. I do all the time. And there's just so much good stuff that I actually founded from that.
It's kind of coming, bubbling back up again
Absolutely, it was. But at the time, I know now that I wasn't ready for it. I needed to learn some hard life lessons, because I'm a stubborn guy. That's the way I work.
Along with the rest of us, right?
Absolutely.
So when did you know that you wanted to go into the armed forces and kind of be a special forces dude?
Well, funny. After I graduated high school, I joined the Coast Guard.
Oh, you did?
Yes.
Wow.
So I spent 4 years in the Coast Guard. I actually joined in because I wanted to go to school. I wanted to use the GI Bill to put me through school. And I love motorcycles. Hence why I got a tattoo of a sprocket and a spark plug and everything, because I loved that was my getaway, is the motorcycles and riding. So that was kind of like my sanctuary. But so I joined the Coast Guard to be able to go to school, and I wound up being in the military in the Coast Guard when 9/11 happened.
Oh,
And that changed the paradigm shift for the entire military, for everybody in the world, I guess, especially us. So I went from being an engine mechanic on a boat to being in the law enforcement. And I went to all these law enforcement schools and started getting into federal law enforcement.
Okay. Did you enjoy that? Did you enjoy it with the Coast Guard?
I did. I absolutely loved it.
How long were you in the Coast Guard?
I did 4 years. I was 4
years.
years in the Coast Guard.
Okay.
And I actually, I wound up getting married right before I got out of the Coast Guard for the very first time. And it was pretty rough for me because, believe it or not, in the Coast Guard, I deployed to Iraq when
In the Coast Guard.
In the Coast Guard.
Was that after 9?
That was after 9/11. That was the first big push back in 2003. So not a whole lot of people know that Coast Guard were there.
I have a friend in the Coast Guard, so I did know that they did.
Yeah, so we did some amazing stuff over there.
Wow, that's so wonderful.
Yeah.
And is that when you kind of got a taste of really making a difference in the world and, protecting your country and in
It
sort of
did.
covert operations and all
Yeah,
that?
actually, and we did. Normally, the Coast Guard doesn't really do too much. You're in the public eye, and they see a lot of things. They do a lot of boardings, and we did chasing after go-fast and catching drugs, busting
Wow.
cocaine.
And that was all through up the coast of our coast and.
Oh yeah, that was off of our coast. That was off of pretty close to Colombia. That was in.
Oh wow! So were you on the East Coast or the West Coast?
I
with
was on the
Coast
West
Guard?
Coast most of the
Okay.
time, and then the Gulf Coast we did some of our stuff. But after 9/11 happened, and we went through and started going through more in-depth training for law enforcement, I really felt my sense of purpose. It kind of made me feel like a Rambo, I guess, in a sense that I kind of really had my protector thing going on. I didn't
Woke
really
up your warrior spirit, did it?
That's absolutely what it was. And I didn't really realize it at the time, but I knew that there was something brewing up inside of me that wanted to do something bigger.
And I don't know that everyone realizes that God, the Bible says that God is a warrior, a God mighty in battle. He is a warrior, has a warrior spirit. He is absolutely powerful.
He is.
And so I love the warrior spirit in men and women. It's very much like God. It's very much an attribute that God has. So you were in the Coast Guard for 4 years.
Yes.
And then did you go right into the Army from there?
Actually, I got out of the Coast Guard and I went to the school to serve my purpose. I felt I served my purpose in the Coast Guard. I wanted to go to school, and I went to school at machinery at a motorcycle mechanics institute to work on motorcycles because that was my passion.
Right.
But then I realized working on motorcycles and going to school full time doesn't pay bills, and life is pretty tough. So wound up letting that go. Found out that I was having a son and realized, oh boy, I kind of need to do something a little bit different because things didn't really quite turn out how I expected getting out of the military. And I felt that a strong calling for me to be in the military still.
You did, okay.
Yeah.
So you got out of the Coast Guard and then found out that you're going to start a family.
Yes.
And you went to school and you got that degree that you wanted to, or that
Well,
license.
I didn't finish it. I cut
Okay.
it short,
Okay,
which
because of
which was
family.
which was pretty tough. Yeah. But I decided I needed to do something better. So
Still had that call to.
Yeah.
So why the Army? Why did you choose the Army?
Well, funny thing is, they were the only ones that were willing to accept me because of my tattoos at the time.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I was so
That's
eager. I was so
interesting.
eager to get out. I was kind of testing the waters on everything and all the branches. And the Coast Guard didn't want me. They didn't want me back. They're
Even
like,
with all that training.
yeah.
Crazy.
Well, they're very popular. So they had
that's
enough
true.
people, and
Oh,
they're a lot smaller than any other branch of the military.
Okay.
So they can be picky.
Right.
And that's what makes them great. So the Army decided to take me in, and I was able to land a position working on helicopters, on Black Hawk helicopters.
I love looking back on my life because even when I didn't know about God and I didn't know him or I wasn't aware of him, he was aware of me and he was leading me and guiding me. And I look back on my life and I think, wow, I could never have made that decision on my own. The Lord led me. Do you feel that was what happened with you when you ended up in the Army with the Nighthawks?
The Night Stalkers, yes.
Or Night Stalker, sorry.
That's okay. At the time, I had no clue. I was by myself. I was just taking on the world.
When you look back on it now, though,
But
does it-
absolutely, it's all mapped out. And,
when you talk about it, you glow.
Yeah.
It looks to me like that it was a wonderful experience for you because you do have this warrior and protective nature.
Yeah, I absolutely loved it. I mean, there were tough times, for sure, being in any branch of the military, law enforcement. I mean, you go
Right.
through your tough times, but when you're actually out there doing your job, what you train for,
Right.
I mean, it's just a great feeling to be able to go out there, put on your gear, make sure the helicopter's flying, and
Right.
go get the job done. Go take the boys to where they need to go, and make sure that you're bringing them all back home.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah.
So did you develop very close relationships with your team?
Absolutely. A lot of good friends. Went through different schools with some good friends of mine, different training, just all throughout. It was good camaraderie being in the military, and it's a
Right.
very, very tight knit organization. And I originally went in in the regular Army aspect with 3rd Infantry Division, and after my first 18-month deployment, I came back and decided kind of being the next tier level of being on the special operations is what I wanted to do. So I went through Green Platoon, which is the assessment for the Night Stalkers, the 160th, and that's when I became
Right.
a Night Stalker.
So, although when you talk about it, you glow and I can see a real sense of accomplishment, there were real challenges and things that you saw and things that really affected you in such a high conflict position. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's right. When you get out there and you do stuff, I was a crew chief, so I first started off working on helicopters, and then I evolved into being a gunner and
And
being a
what
crew.
kind of helicopters were you
This
on?
is a Black Hawk helicopter.
Black Hawk.
So I was progressing in my career as that. So I learned how to work on the helicopters, learned how to maintain the helicopters, learned operating parameters and procedures and temperatures, and being able to kind of keep an eye on what's going on, and then moved into a leadership role to where I could be able to train other SOF members, Special Operation Forces members, to be able to do the helicopters, fast roping, training evolutions with them. That way, in training, we can perfect what's going on, and then that way, out there in conflict, you know, they perfect what's going on.
And so, did you see quite a bit of conflict yourself?
I did. I've been multiple deployments, absolutely, and seeing that stuff is hardening, and it changes you seeing that. And you know, they say the war is hell, and although it's probably not quite the same as that. It's very hard to deal with.
And did
No
you
matter
lose some
what it
friends?
is. I've lost some people that I've known, absolutely, and it was tough because even in training evolutions, I've known people that have passed away and died just from training, because the type of training that we do is very high speed. It's very in depth, and I mean, we learn to train as you fight.
Wow.
And it's a tough aspect to be able to go, excuse me, it's a tough aspect to be able to go and train, come back, go out and train, and then come back and then go and deploy and, you know, use all those things. And you're constantly on the go, and you come back and you expect to kind of get a little bit of downtime, and you can't, because you have to go to a funeral and put your one of your buddies in the ground. And that's very tough.
And so, even though I can see in you that it was an experience that you probably wouldn't give up because it was so fulfilling, still there are parts of it that haunt you. Is that correct?
Absolutely. Going through that, excuse me, going through that was difficult in itself. Just the aspect of constantly being away, constantly coming back home, going away, coming back. They don't really train you for that. And having a family back at home, it's very hard, because you have to, I call it the light switch. You have to shut it off, and then you can't focus. You can't concentrate on stuff back home, because you really got to focus on what's going on here right in front of you.
Especially when you know you're going to deploy again. And
Exactly.
And how did that affect your family?
It started to go downhill pretty quick, and I didn't realize it. And it was a very tough thing to be able to shut off the past and what happened, and then kind of get back to reality, and then you know that you kind of have to go back into it, because you kind of want some downtime, you kind of want some time to yourself, you kind of develop your own little bubble in your own reality, which is not even close to reality. And I was slowly deteriorating.
And that affects your marriage and your relationships?
It absolutely. My entire life just pretty much got flipped upside down, and my marriage went down the hill because I couldn't control anything, myself, my emotions, everything just got a hold of me. My PTSD, my anxiety. I
So
couldn't
you got
sleep.
diagnosed with PTSD. It
I
was
did.
very traumatic.
I got medically retired. I went on a trip to South America, and I came back, and I was having a hard time standing upright. And
Wow.
I found out that I had some issues with my back, and I
Oh,
had to
there you go.
rehabilitate my back.
Wow.
And the Army saw me unfit. So basically, they said, "Well, we're going to retire you."
So here you have all this trauma and this PTSD and everything else, and now what you've known, your relationships have disintegrated, and what you've always known now is taken away from you.
Yeah, my home, my house, just everything just kind of came to a screeching halt, and just like that, the Army just said, there you go. And along with everything, I took that so hard, and it crushed me. It was destroying, and I just tacked it all on my shoulders.
And you mentioned to me that you felt like you had no hope, you had no future.
Yeah, absolutely. It was very disheartening because I felt like, just that part of my world was just coming to an end. It was crashing. And the only thing I knew is to just keep going. I had stopped and let go of things in the past, and going through training and selection course for the 160th, you learn our motto is Night Stalkers don't quit. So the mentality stuck with me, and I think that's a huge part of my mentality, and where God is leading me right now is to not quit. And before I even found Him, I found and realized that I just needed to move on. I didn't know how, but I was just going to continue going.
So you ended up out of the Army, and now everything's imploding around you.
Yeah.
You said, and can you explain to me where you came to your very end of yourself, and how the Lord met you and delivered you and gave you hope again?
Yeah, it wasn't still for a very long time because I'm very stubborn. And I remember having a conversation with a few people, and I would always tell them that I felt that I wasn't worried to, or I wasn't good enough to pray for myself. Like I needed to save that and reserve that for other people. The only thing that I would pray for was for God to give me broader shoulders so I can carry the weight on my back, because that's kind of the way I grew up. That's really the only way I knew how, is to just put it back there and to keep going.
And the burden just kept getting heavier.
It kept going and heavier and heavier. And God's got a funny sense of humor. He let me carry the weight of the world, and He let me see it. And it just drove me down and down. And at this time, I didn't realize it. And I was just going down and down and down. And basically everything that I touched, every relationship that I was in, it was just falling apart. And I didn't know why. And I was struggling. I couldn't sleep. I had anxiety. I was dealing with PTSD, and it was tough.
And you mentioned to me that you got to a point where you just had hit the wall.
I did. I came to a point where I completely passed out. I got into a very dark state, and I woke up with my dog licking my face in the middle of this road, and I was shaking. I was trembling, and I had to go give all my guns. I had to go give everything that I had away because I was scared. I was in a dark, dark place that I've never been before. And I realized that there are a lot of people that have been in that spot before.
right.
And that's when I stopped. And I realized I couldn't do it anymore. And I asked God to help me out.
You cried out to God.
Oh man, I did.
Right.
And that's tough for a warrior that is trained to do that, to submit and to kneel down and to ask for help.
But we know that there are many people even watching us now who are at that point, or getting to that point where they know that they have no more solutions, that they're at the end. And when you cried out to God, can you tell us about that? I want to give them hope that no matter how bad it's been, or how black it's been, or how bleak it's been, that God knows where you are.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm an instant gratification type of person. He knew that too. So it's kind of funny. I expected something to happen right away, and it didn't happen right away. But I kept pressing in. I kept asking God. I was getting into the book. I was reading. I was listening to the Word. And I would just say, I was so worried, so anxious, had so much anxiety, and I'd just say, Lord, help me. Please don't let my heart be troubled. And just kept going into it. And within a couple of weeks, I started seeing things. I was having a hard time at work. I couldn't focus. I couldn't concentrate. I would be up in attics, crying for, minutes. And I was a mess. And then I wound up living in a small little camper trailer, and I just kind of submitted and I said, God, I don't know where to go. I need you to help me. I need you to lead me.
And as you cried out to him, did you begin to feel his presence and begin to see him answering you and giving you peace? And
Yes, I didn't hear him the way I expected to hear him. I expected to be able to have a buddy that sit down next to me like, all right, pal, here's what's going on. This is what we're going to do. It didn't work out like that. However, I was seeing relief. I was pressing into him, and my anxiety was going away. I wound up knowing some really good friends that allowed me to move into a small little apartment. I wound up getting a job just a couple weeks later. My life instantly started turning around within a couple of weeks. And
so he was hearing you.
he was hearing
and
me the entire
answering
time.
you.
He wanted to make sure that I was ready and committed.
Right. And he was, I love that, because so often so often the Lord doesn't speak to us the same way. Each person is just different, and their story is different, and their deliverance is different.
Absolutely.
And yours was a cry and a surrender.
It was a cry and a surrender, and it wasn't until later that I kept pressing more into him that I really started hearing him and feeling him in a more intimate level, in a more real level that I could actually understand. But I guess basically what had to happen was I need to quiet my mind. I had to quiet my soul. I needed to get rid of all that stuff that was consuming me to be able to actually hear what's going on.
And so would you tell our audience that if they cry out to God, he'll hear them and begin to give them peace and deliverance and turn their life around?
Absolutely. Giving your life over, God expects us to be able to, submit to him and, give it all out. And if you ask and you have it in your heart fully that that's what you want to do, he will answer you.
And your life has really turned around. It's been really fun to watch
It absolutely
and
has.
we just want so much for the people who are watching now, no matter what you've gone through. He can deliver and heal. You were telling me you've been talking to some of the professionals that you talk to, and they're seeing a big difference in you. We're seeing your life turn around. I've been watching you. It's been so much fun
Absolutely.
to see the joy come over you and your life to be redeemed. And I'm just excited to see what God's doing with
I'm
you and
excited
going to
too.
do as you move in ordination. And so we want everyone to know that God is here for them, and that they can be delivered, and that they can see him move in their life as well. Don't give
Absolutely.
up and don't
Absolutely.
give in.
Night Stalkers don't quit.
That's right.